nerd.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Technical Nerdist channel. The Technical Nerdist means that, number one, I'm a nerd, as you can see by all of my nerdy stuff behind me. Second, I'm a broadcast technician, so I like to take things apart and put them back together. That being said, a few months ago my uncle passed away, and he was a ham operator, as I used to be. My license has expired, KI6 GSE. Don't worry, I'll get it back someday, once I settle down a little more. But he had a radio collection, and one of the radios that he had in his collection actually belonged to my granduncle, and it was a Patterson 70 AW. These radios were made in California by a small company called Patterson Radio Company, and they were built in the 1930s. This radio we've dated to 1934, which makes it roughly 87 years old, almost 90 years old. So it's not in mint condition, but it's not in terrible condition. Let's take a look at it. So as you can see, everything appears to be in order here. There are all of the knobs, and nothing is tightened down. It looks like the cabinet, is a little dusty, and the speaker grill cloth is a little torn. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. But I know there's a lot of people out there that work on these radios. And as you can see, it looks like all the tubes were taken out, and the stickers are gone, so I can't tell you the serial number or anything on this radio. But my goal is to take this thing completely apart, recap it, clean it all up, and bring it back to its former glory. So a little brief history about the Patterson Radio Company. In around 1920, Emmett Patterson started selling parts. Building your own radio in those days was a big craze, and people needed the parts. So they needed capacitors and resistors and the tuners and all kinds of things. So that's how his business started. And around 1930, he hired Ray Goody, who was his chief engineer. And Ray Goody is the man who designed the radios, the actual units. And so there was the 60 AW, 70 AW, and the 80 AW. And I believe there was also a 74 AW, which is a slightly different body from mine. The number of the radio, or the number of the radio, so 60, 70, and 80 corresponds with the number of tubes. So you have the 60 had 6 tubes, the 70 had 7 tubes, and the 80 had 8 tubes. So this is how I know that mine is the 70 AW, because I have 7 tubes that I'm dealing with on the chassis. Not many of the radios that were made by Patterson, number one, they didn't make many to begin with. And a lot of them were shipped over to New Zealand. For some reason, I don't know why, they went from Los Angeles to New Zealand. You don't find these radios very often in the Midwest, the East Coast, or in Europe. But you do find them in New Zealand and in California. And even finding them in California at this point is very hard. So this is a fairly rare radio, and that's why I want to restore it and put it back together so that it stays in my family for a long time. Like I said, it was my granduncle's, it went to my uncle, and now I've got it. 3 of us were hams and radio enthusiasts. So it's kind of important to me to keep that history alive. None of my kids are really into the same things that I am at this point, but who knows where the future goes. One of my kids may think it's really cool and want to keep it and show it off, and so I want it to work. I want to bring it back to its glory, but the problem with these radios, and in the 1930s, you have to realize that the technology is nowhere near what it is today. The capacitors, the paper capacitors, leaked like a sieve. They're terrible. The resistors are probably okay. They're all dog bone, I believe. So I'm gonna be pulling the radio apart in the next video, and we'll go through it. What my plan is to completely deconstruct everything from the chassis and clean the chassis up really good, give it a nice shine, paint down, whatever I need to do to make it look really good. And then I'm going to replace all of the capacitors with probably some axial film capacitors, keeping the values that they are currently. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know how many modifications were done to this radio in the past. Like I said, my granduncle was a radio enthusiast, and he had a stockpile of parts in his shack. So I remember growing up as a kid and playing with him in his shack, and there were just pieces everywhere. So he could have done a lot of modifications to this radio. So I'm going to break it down to what it currently has, and then I'm going to locate through Writers. I'm sure Writers has a schematic on this. So I will pull the schematic and I will compare the schematic to what I actually have, and we'll see what changes were made, and maybe the changes don't make sense, maybe they do. But in any case, I'm going to recap the entire radio. I'm going to go through every resistor. We're going to go through the whole process. I'm going to tune the IF. We're going to get it all up and running. So if you stay with me through this, there's not a lot of YouTube content on restoring Patterson radios. Shango 60, I don't remember what his channel was. There's one guy out there that has made a couple of the radios work by just kind of putting a couple of caps in here and there just to turn them on and show that they actually still work. My goal in this is a complete teardown, rebuild, and refurbishment. So the underside, if you flipped it over, will no longer look like it was built in the 1930s. It will look like it was built in the modern age. And who knows, in 30 years or 40 years, when this radio is still humming along, somebody looks at that and says, wow, these are old, and they'll want to remodify it with whatever the current technology is of the day. But I'm going to keep the tubes. I'm going to find and track down these tubes. And I believe one of the actual rectifier on this is an 82 mercury vapor rectifier, which I'm a little leery about using the mercury vapor, but it's what was originally there, so I want to keep it as original on the top as possible, even though the underside will be new capacitors, maybe a bunch of new resistors. The top will have the original tubes. I want to keep that as accurate as possible to the historical build of this radio. So I hope you enjoy following along with this rebuild, and if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Viewers are very important to me right now because I'm trying to build this channel up. If you like this content, having the viewers will actually be able to get me to monetize some of this, and then I can buy these tubes, because these tubes are not cheap. Some of these tubes, I think, probably go upwards of 100 to 200 bucks a pop or more. So, you know, is it worth rebuilding this radio? Feasibly, financially, maybe not, but it's a personal thing for me, and it's important that I get it up for family's sake. So follow along with me, please. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and I hope it goes well. I mean, we'll see at the end of the project how it all looks and works out. I don't have a timeline. Again, these parts are expensive. I've got a family, so I'm not going to be buying everything all at once. But capacitors and resistors are cheap enough that I can go through the radio. So I'm going to deconstruct the entire radio first, and then see what I need to purchase for capacitors and resistors after testing all the resistors. Some of the dog bones may be fine. So we'll look at that and see you in the next one.
If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to click the subscribe button. Also, click the bell icon to receive notifications when I upload new content. And as always, thanks for watching.